Good evening, everyone. Time for episode 41 of The Last Admiral. And we're going to take off where we left off. It is March 28th, 2022. And the chapter heading is Douglas and Wayne fight heroically to save their company. All right. Slowed by harassing archery, the Firmish commanders adjusted their tactics and formed a shield wall at the head of their formation and above their heads like a tortoise shell. Using the bastion itself as a shield, their cavalry swerved southward strategically in order to close the gap between forces. Captain Wayne examined the terrain and weighed their options. In minutes, the Firmin would have them corralled and force them to fight to the death. Behind them was a narrow field just outside of the castle's walls, skirting a sheer precipice of 100 feet that reached all the way to the sea. Izzy's Marines were fighting valiantly atop of the Barbican in a useless battle against overwhelming odds. "Izzy," Wayne shouted, "get out of there!" Certainly, there was no way that his voice carried above the rising sounds of conflict, but by some miracle, soldiers began to come over the wall and scale down. Behind them, a large explosion of searing flame flashed over their heads as Izzy scrambled down after them. "That should hold them off for a few seconds," he announced. "We couldn't do it, Marion. They were waiting for us." "Never mind that," Wayne replied. "We're pulling out of here. Move back to the boats on the double. We will have to get back the way that we came in. It's the only way." "You'll need more time," Izzy declared. "You lead them out. I'll slow the bastards down. We could scale down the cliffs and run for it." "No good," Izzy grumbled. "They've got it rigged with log traps. I saw them from upstairs." "How many men do you need?" "Give me 4 volunteers with grenades." "We're way ahead of you, sir," Izzy's first sergeant declared. "No way is the team moving out without you." "I'll see you back on the beach, Izzy," Marion affirmed. "Move out on the double, Marines, and stay on the trail." One by one, they then began the perilous journey back toward the woods, across the field of earthworks, traps, and other defenses. The first few men had just entered the wood line as a new volley of fireworks lit up the entire area. Archers on the battlements, now seeing their fleeing targets, began releasing a withering hail of missiles. Their one safe path through the maze of obstacles had become a death trap. Marines, suddenly struck from behind while on the run, tumbled into the soldiers in front of them, often knocking them both into deep pits lined with poisoned spikes, or onto rows of sharpened stakes placed as hedgeworks on every flank. Marines began to bunch up by the dozens in the midfield, as safe routes of passage grew harder to find. It was then that the Firmin sprung the second part of their trap. Waiting for just the right moment, archers lying in wait in camouflage bunkers dropped their concealed panels forward and caught the Marines in crossfire, while a second group of footmen, hidden in the woods, flanked any fighters trying to escape the field. In seconds, 1 in 3 Marines was lying dead or dying. There was no cover or concealment, no safety, nowhere to run. "Marines!" Wayne commanded in an effort to rally them. "Use your shields and move out in fire teams." Amid hails of broad-bladed arrows and balls of burning pitch, it was then to their credit that the remaining soldiers came together. Exploding bundles of hay and oil landed within their ranks, delivering great cascades of clinging fire, unquenchable save with copious amounts of soil. Clustering together in small groups of 5 warriors, with shields held to every quarter, their progress slowed, but their casualties diminished. Squads of Marines reached the forest only to find a pitched battle with no way forward except through the Firmish host. There, among the trees and clinging vines, the fight was vicious, bloody, and close quarters. Come on, Izzy, he said urgently upon reaching the first line of trees and taking shelter behind one. We're out of time. Captain Douglas and his team used the barbican walls for shelter while they still could, sneaking forward and around the curved base of the bastion until they could see the enemy's line. They prepared their grenades of explosive powders and hurled them as one. The resulting blasts of fire and smoke killed many soldiers in the front ranks and delayed the cavalry. Archers, Izzy ordered, loose! Taking advantage of the brief chaos, they fired many arrows into the disrupted formation. Fall back in fire teams, he commanded, when the moment was ripe. First Sergeant, you're with me. I wouldn't have it any other way, Cap, Stephen Lancaster replied. And we should all know that Stephen Lancaster is my version of Burt Lancaster of Hollywood. Okay. Standing beside his commander, their backs hugged the castle walls, but once the burning oil on the battlements above them had ceased to burn, it would shelter them no longer. But we don't have much of a future here, he said with a soft, understated grin. Almost as tall as Captain Wayne, his hair was blonde and wavy, and his eyes were blue. Nocking an arrow, he held another 3 in his bow hand for a fast draw. Moving out behind the last group, they fired arrows on the move, and so great was their skill that many Furmen fell wounded or dying on the field behind them. The earthworks were perilous, preventing their all-out flight, but they also prevented the advancement of the armed cavalry. Raising their shields, they joined the last group and stalked towards the woods. Firmish archers, seeing the last of their quarry leaving the field, left their places of hiding in search of better vantage points. Atop the barbican, the Furmen extinguished the fires and emplaced a trebuchet in order to engage the retreating Marines. A gigantic ball of flame, burning resins and other flammables, exploded within feet of Izzy's team. The forest was still some distance away, which gave the Furmen time for another volley. Run for it, Marines, Izzy commanded. It's our only chance. Breaking formation, they raced as fast as they could toward the battle in the woods. Top, struck in the thigh, fell hard. Get out of here, Izzy, he implored. Don't even think about it, Izzy replied, as he bent down low and heaved Lancaster onto his back. At least this way, he teased with a grin. They'll probably hit you first. Somehow, they reached the woods. Nearly a third of their Marines had not made it. It was not their code to leave their fallen comrades on the field, and many were willing to risk everything and retrieve their fellows. But such a desperate act would result in all of their deaths. Captain Wayne held them back. Izzy lowered Lancaster gently to the ground behind cover. The arrow's shaft protruded from his thigh and appeared to have stopped upon striking his femur. Blood seeped slowly from around the arrow. Glad that you two could make it, Izzy, Captain Wayne said. It doesn't look good. They cut us off, Wayne replied. We'll have to fight our way through them in order to get to those longboats. Grimacing, Top snapped the arrow off near to his thigh with a twist of his wrist. Getting awkwardly to his feet, he slung his bow and drew swords. Well, what are we waiting for? Okay. On the southern slopes, Captain Norris led with bold courage. Fanning out, they navigated the earthworks cautiously, engaging enemy knights when they found them. A winding maze of fighting trenches linked the area's defenses to the tower lighthouse and the road to the fortress beyond it. Squads of Firmish knights lay in wait for them there, hurling javelins, sling stones, and other deadly missiles at them when they came into range. Captain Norris led the way through the trenches like a savage beast. He fights like a bulldog, said one soldier. No, remarked another, more like a wounded dragon. Their debate raged on between the chaos of terrible struggles and arrows falling from the sky, resulting in the great slaughter of troops on both sides. With some difficulty, they routed the remaining knights. Outnumbered and caught in the same deadly missile fire as their enemies, They fell back toward the fort's massive gatehouse in its drawbridge. Norris fought hard to maintain control. A deep trench behind a high mound of earth gave him the opportunity. Serving as a barrier for horsemen, it was less difficult for soldiers on foot and offered some protection from the archers firing down on them from the battlements. They regrouped there. Cagney looked over the hill. The knights had entered the castle and raised the drawbridge. A long field of hilltop defensive works spread out between them, and a deep trench or moat spanned the full length of the hilltop. "That's about it, Charles," he observed. "If we go for it, they'll cut us to pieces. The fleet will never make it with both forts bearing down on them. We just need to keep their heads down for a while." "We've got about 10 minutes, I'd say," Cagney said, looking due west and toward the city, "before that regiment is on us." The flash of fireworks in the sky then revealed a large body of troops moving toward them in formation along the road leading to the castle. Norris peered carefully over the mound in order to get a better view for himself. Jarrett was right. Outfitted in a black uniform and quiet padded armor equal to that of his troops, he had used charcoal to camouflage his hands, face, and weapons. All a blessing under the cover of darkness, but now much less so, as explosive works lit up the night sky like the light of day. They lacked both the time and the strength to take the castle, but they could cause a diversion. "Top," he asked, "how many oil satchels do we have left?" "We've still got most of them, sir," he reported. "At least 30 satchels." The liquid that they contained was composed of naphtha, sulfur, and other ingredients in a special formula that actually burned hotter if the enemy used water to extinguish it. "Good," Charles declared. "We've got 30 satchels. I need 30 volunteers." His Marines had long since accepted the risks of their station. More than 30 came forward. "Get ready, men. Attack the drawbridge and then fall back on the double. Archers, train your arrows on that lighthouse balcony and the castle's defenders." Marines, moving out in buddy teams, cut across the ditch and then over the mound in order to avoid being seen as long as possible. In the field before them, the defenses and their deadly traps were almost impenetrable, except for the castle's road itself, a massive expanse of spiked pits. Razor-sharp wire and deep muddy wallows prevented them from flanking the fortress's gatehouse. And naphtha is a clear, volatile, inflammable bituminous liquid hydrocarbon, exuding from the earth or distilled from coal tar and rock oil, from Webster's Dictionary. Okay. It was exactly the way that the Furman had designed it. Firing down from the battlements, Firmish archers had no trouble finding their targets. 10 Marines never made it close enough to throw their payloads, but 20 of them did, racing forward erratically to avoid making easy targets. With the last of the grenadiers still in full flight, Captain Norris ignited a clothed arrow, took careful aim, and loosed. His shot was true, and a smoky blaze quickly enveloped the drawbridge. "Archers, protect the grenadiers," Cagney commanded before loosing an arrow of his own. "We need to move, Cap." The drawbridge was soon an unrelenting inferno, filling the air with black smoke. The regiment of foot soldiers approaching from the city rushed forward at a trot to engage them. "Fall back in fire teams," Norris ordered. Group by group, his men withdrew, while those remaining providing covering fire against the advancing troops. Norris, Cagney, Top, and 4 other Marines were the last to retreat. Running toward the hidden longboats with the Firmish regiment close behind them, Top took a bolt through his neck and fell to his knees. Attempting to rise, he collapsed. "Marines," Norris directed after determining that he still lived, "get him back to the boats." "Aye, sir," the corporal replied. "Hang on, Top." "I'll take his feet," Cagney said. "Try and keep his head steady." Norris turned around to face the coming threat. A small group of mounted knights was fast approaching. Sprinting toward them, he made himself an obvious target. Arrows flew past him. Firmish knights dressed in crimson liveries lowered their lances and charged. Only the road was a place of safety for them, so Captain Norris intentionally ran into the areas of spiked pits and deadly obstacles in order to avoid them. Leaping over a wide-mouthed pit like a leopard, he cleared it easily. Rushing up a short slope, dressed with leaning spears, he wove his way through them and found cover behind a small mound of earth. Nocking an arrow, he fired at their leader, but he was well armored and carrying a tower shield. Reining in his course, the Firmish captain dismounted. "We'll take him on foot," he commanded. "I want him alive." Charles Norris was already on the move. He could not see his company any more. They should have been halfway to the beach by then. Low-crawling along the bottom of a ditch, he tried to distance himself from the search party. "He's not here," one knight reported. "He can't have gone far." Opening his visor, the first knight searched the shadows. It was a foolish mistake. Norris's arrow took him through the mouth, and he fell in a heap, his body sliding down a muddy embankment and into a hedge of spears. He moved between hiding places upon discovery, stopping only to fire at soldiers drawing too near. Time was against him, as the regiment of soldiers was now joining in the search. The Firmish commander was cunning, and clearly knew that one fighter could do little against a host of heavily armored knights. Advancing in a wide, close-linked formation, they tried to surround him. His own avenue for escape was the precipitous cliff itself. Slinging his bow over his shoulder, he ran for it. An obstacle of heavy spears stood between him and the ledge. Most athletes would have considered such a hurdle impossible. Norris only ran faster, narrowly missing a water-filled man-trap on his left. An arrow grazed his cheek, and another clipped his shoulder. Running straight toward the spears, he leaped, higher than any other man could, and well above the edge of the tallest barbs. Deftly descending, the balls of his feet danced along the last of their points until he had cleared the obstacle. Landing as lightly as a falling leaf, he never stopped. Behind him, the Firmen were in awe of what they had just seen, and for precious moments it mesmerized them. One great ditch remained between Norris and the brink. Sprinting with all his might, he jumped higher and further still than his last. Clearing the pit, he passed straight over the edge, falling down into the darkness beyond it. The knights moved cautiously to the edge of the cliff and looked for him, but there were no elves among them, and none could see his body on the rocks below. Moving to a nearby trigger mechanism, their captain pulled a heavy lever, releasing a gigantic mass of tree trunks held horizontally across the lip of the cliff face. A score of 30 to 50-foot-long logs over a foot thick were suddenly unleashed. Careening down the slope, they would crush any living thing in their path beyond recognition. The captain smiled beneath his helmet's visor. "Quickly, knights," he ordered. "To the beach. We'll drown these rats in the sea." And that's where we'll end today's episode 41. Episode 42 we'll take up on page 350 with the chapter entitled Rolling Seas and Clinging Fire, where we'll meet the Captain William Kidd and his men. So, hope you enjoyed it, and we'll have to find out next time, perhaps, if Captain Norris survived his leap over the cliff. Thank you, and have a great night.